Time is the ultimate assassin of memory. It erodes stone, buries iron, and turns the greatest names in human history into mere whispers of dust. While empires rose and collapsed like autumn leaves, the final resting place of the man who conquered the world remained untouched. Not because it was protected by guards, but because it was protected by the one thing no conqueror can defeat: absolute, crushing silence. If you are watching this right now, I want to ask you something. How much of history do you think is actually true? Because what you are about to hear was never meant to reach you. These are the classified files, the buried evidence, and the forbidden stories that powerful forces spent decades trying to erase. If you are someone who refuses to accept the official story, you are in the right place. Subscribe to the Dark History Files and join thousands of truth seekers uncovering what history tried to hide. Welcome back. This is the Dark History Files, and today we expose a truth that was never meant to be told. Decades elapsed post-burial, and the physical cosmos maintained its relentless momentum. Plains expanded across the Mongolian interior beneath shifting atmospheric patterns. Rivers carved deep channels through isolated valleys. Timberlines advanced and receded across diverse sectors. Settlements materialized, migrated, and dissolved, dictated by the logistics of successive lineages. Across this boundless topography, no structural monument anchored the final coordinate of Genghis Khan. The chosen terrain integrated seamlessly into the geography, assimilating into a world mutating around it. For the populations navigating these centuries, history was processed through oral chronicles, nomadic transit, and fractured memory rather than empirical knowledge of the interred sovereign. Vanguards breached alpine passes and exposed lowlands. Merchants tracked trade corridors linking remote empires. The acoustic signatures of commerce, livestock, and daily survival populated the settlements scattered across Asia. Yet, throughout this continuous movement, the coordinates of the tomb remained omitted from routine intelligence. It existed as a phantom concept rather than a verified destination. As successive lineages replaced the original custodians, the equilibrium between data and data void shifted permanently. Individuals holding direct intelligence vanished from the historical record. Dynasties fell. New coalitions consolidated power. Frontiers were redrawn. Imperial archives accumulated precise logs regarding warfare, commerce, and diplomacy, while the burial vector receded further into obscurity. The geopolitical landscape enveloping the enigma grew increasingly complex, yet the nucleus of the mystery became impenetrable to conventional forensic methodology. This protracted silence signals a distinct strategic triumph. Conventional ancient sites endure because generations continuously execute reconnaissance, document anomalies, and maintain infrastructure. Here, the inverse architecture operated. Centuries expired without a verified coordinate entering the public matrix. The void itself became the monument. A hidden grave survived not through structural visibility, but through the systematic preservation of uncertainty. As time advanced, the enigma intensified its grip on history precisely because its terminal answer remained rationed. The centuries following the interment witnessed tectonic shifts across Eurasia. Empires metastasized, fractured, and surrendered to emergent dynasties. Trade corridors linked remote civilizations through the transit of commerce and human capital. Metropolises surged and decayed. Political frontiers mutated continuously as rulers executed imperial ambitions. Through these massive transformations, intelligence circulated across continents. Yet the coordinates of Genghis Khan's tomb remained completely omitted from the historical exchange. Vanguards breached immense distances during this epoch. Merchants navigated corridors linking East Asia, the steppe, the Near East, and Europe. Diplomats transmitted intelligence between courts separated by thousands of miles. Chroniclers recorded observations of foreign frontiers, leaving behind codices that provide historians with critical diagnostic data. Yet, among the infinite details preserved within these archives, the burial coordinate remained entirely elusive. This void sharpens when measured against the global reach of Genghis Khan. His shadow extended far beyond the Mongolian plateau. Chronicles of his campaigns penetrated regions his cavalry never breached. Sovereigns dissected the architecture of his empire. Scribes documented his conquests. The conqueror achieved absolute immortality, yet his terminal coordinate remained buried. This friction engineered an unprecedented paradox. A globally dominant figure possessing a final resting place isolated from human consciousness. Cartography also evolved across these eras. Mapmakers attempted to chart the known cosmos using available intelligence. New vectors surfaced, geographical data expanded. Frontiers once deemed inaccessible uniformized through trade and reconnaissance. Yet, cartography only records verified data. A hidden tomb offers zero metrics for a mapmaker to plot. The enigma consequently remained outside the expanding registry of geographic data, existing beyond the boundaries of documented certainty. Simultaneously, oral lineages transmitted fractured segments of the narrative. Nomadic factions retained the memory of an engineered burial. Specific topographies maintained their ideological links to the conqueror. The macro-narrative endured while precise tactical data points faded beyond verification. This synthesis of remembrance and data void insulated the secret across generations. The empire acknowledged a hidden asset existed, but lacked the coordinates required to intercept it. By the terminus of these centuries, the silence enveloping the tomb became its definitive asset. Civilization accumulated intelligence on infinite subjects. Archives expanded, geographical reconnaissance matured. Yet, the burial site resisted confirmation. The enigma mutated through time alongside a transforming world, insulated from the developments that deciphered other sectors of historical knowledge. Within that unbroken silence, the hidden grave receded into the deep past. As centuries accumulated, time itself emerged as the primary architect of the enigma. A decade preserves living memory, a century severs direct experience. Across multiple centuries, the relationship with antiquity mutates completely. Events once witnessed by human agents recede into archives, oral lineages, and interpretation. The interment of Genghis Khan systematically entered this detachment, migrating from active remembrance into a realm where history relies entirely on fractured data. This transition re-engineered how the narrative was processed. Early generations viewed the burial as a contemporary event linked to known actors and verifiable sectors. Successive lineages confronted a different reality, inheriting chronicles rather than experiences. Core nomenclature survived while tactical data decayed. The macro-narrative endured while precise coordinates became impossible to recover. The enigma mutated during transit, transforming a protected military secret into a permanent historical query. The structural volatility of archives accelerated this decay. Documents reflect the immediate priorities of their creators. Chroniclers logged accessions and political fracturing. Others itemized commerce, theology, or localized custom. High-value data in one era was discarded in the next. Consequently, the surviving matrix contains vast voids. The burial coordinate of Genghis Khan slipped into one of these institutional blind spots, leaving historians with fragmented references rather than empirical proof. Concurrently, new eras forged independent alignments with the past. Scholars forensically analyzed ancient codices. Oral historians repeated inherited lineages. Communes guarded traditions bound to collective memory. Each faction sustained the legend, yet preservation does not equal clarification. A narrative can survive while its internal metrics dissolve. The survival of the enigma demonstrates this friction between lore and data. A profound irony defines this containment. The Mongol Empire integrated remote regions across Eurasia, accelerating intelligence, sharing, and global commerce. High-value data circulated along corridors secured by imperial authority. Yet, the final coordinate of the empire's architect remained insulated even as the known world integrated. Hyperconnectivity did not guarantee universal transparency. By this epoch, the enigma anchored historical consciousness rather than immediate reality. Populations discussed the hidden tomb because it represented an unresolved equation transmitted across generations. The passage of time transformed a geographic coordinate into a monument of historical denial. Archives survive, memory persists, and landscapes endure, yet specific answers remain rationed. Through centuries of absolute silence, the burial site migrated from the mapped world into the realm of eternal mysteries. As the enigma migrated through centuries, it traversed a succession of distinct worlds. The medieval order disintegrated into new eras. Governance evolved, technologies transformed. Emergent superpowers reshaped Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. Successive populations analyzed the epic of Genghis Khan with intense fascination and detachment. His empire belonged to antiquity, yet its shockwaves resonated through global trade corridors, political frontiers, and cultural networks that outlasted the primary imperial apparatus. Each generation processed antiquity through its own structural lens. Scholars scrutinized ancient codices and compared contradictory data. Vanguards logged regional lore and oral intelligence. Rulers engineered ideological links to historical sovereigns to consolidate authority. Through these mechanisms, the legacy of Genghis Khan remained active within political discourse. Yet, despite mounting scrutiny, empirical intelligence regarding the burial coordinate failed to surface. Obsession endured, certainty expired. This deadlock created an unprecedented historical paradox. Historically dominant figures typically gain transparency as successive evidence is excavated. Archives are unearthed. Archaeology exposes lost matrices. Researchers correlate data points to refine strategic conclusions. In the case of the hidden tomb, however, core questions persisted despite continuous intelligence operations. The enigma mutated alongside the evolution of historiography itself, remaining completely insulated as global knowledge expanded. The topographies anchoring the narrative also experienced systemic shifts. Communes adapted to new logistics, trade vectors migrated. Core routes expanded while peripheral trails dissolved. Environmental transitions altered regional geometry over extended timelines. A vanguard breaching Mongolia in 1 century confronted an ecosystem alien to the terrain known by ancestral generations. These microclimatic modifications further complicated efforts to reconcile written chronicles with verified physical coordinates. Simultaneously, the enigma capitalized on a formidable continuity. While dynasties collapsed and frontiers shifted, the foundational equation remained intact. Where was Genghis Khan interred? The nomenclature mutated, the hypotheses evolved, yet the central data void persisted. This continuity weaponized the mystery, granting it supreme durability. It maintained geopolitical relevance across centuries precisely because the terminal coordinate had never been established. By this epoch, silence transcended the mere absence of data, mutating into a structural asset of the historical record. Investigators anticipated an information vacuum when analyzing the tomb. The lack of a confirmed coordinate was no longer an anomaly. It was an integrated feature of the history. The mystery had consolidated its own independent identity, surviving not through empirical validation, but because successive lineages confronted the identical unresolved equation. The imperial sanctuary remained isolated, propelled through time by forensic curiosity, speculation, and the momentum of an unbroken past. Ultimately, the enigma entered the contemporary era propelled by the kinetic weight of centuries. The world had transformed since the primary interment. Frontiers dissolved, scientific methodology matured, communications hyper-accelerated. Historical reconnaissance achieved deep systemic rigor. Yet, despite this evolution, the hidden tomb remained static within the global subconscious, anchoring a void between collective memory and empirical evidence, verified by tradition but insulated from tactical recovery. Retrospective analysis of these lineages exposes the magnitude of this silence. Dominant historical assets routinely leave a trajectory of citations, codices, or physical signatures to route future investigative vanguards. The final coordinate of Genghis Khan executed an inverse strategy. Century after century expired without a confirmed coordinate breaching the public matrix. This data void resisted political upheavals, cultural mutations, and the continuous accretion of state archives, maintaining a defensive continuity unmatched in the annals of history. The velocity of time also reshaped the structural matrix of the mystery. Immediately post-burial, secrecy served immediate tactical and metaphysical imperatives. Subsequent generations inherited the fallout of those ancestral commands. What initiated as active counterintelligence mutated into an institutional puzzle. Investigators no longer interrogated the coordinates to protect an asset. They questioned because the baseline data had decayed. The objective of the silence transformed while the silence remained absolute. This mechanism exposes a fundamental human drive, the obsession to anchor history to precise geographic coordinates. A hidden tomb systematically repels that intent. It demonstrates that specific historical vectors deny resolution. Certain operations leave tracks for reconnaissance. Others recede behind strata of time until only fragmented data survives. The enigma of Genghis Khan's interment occupies this terminal quadrant, triggering clinical curiosity while withholding empirical confirmation. Throughout these epochs, the Mongolian wilderness maintained its sovereign trajectory. Seasonal cycles rolled across the steppe and massifs. Arterials drained the valleys. Timber zones evolved. Dynasties emerged and disintegrated. The hidden sanctuary, regardless of its precise coordinate, remained integrated within this larger ecosystem. History deployed above the bedrock without exposing the asset beneath. The earth insulated its secret while successive generations scanned the topography for anomalies. At this juncture of the chronology, the definitive metric is not discovery, but total containment. Empires materialized and vanished. Cartography expanded. Vanguards breached continents. Scholars populated archives with logs and conflicting interpretations. Through every transformation, the location of the tomb remained omitted from human knowledge. The centuries expired in absolute silence, and that silence endured. This prolonged absence would eventually trigger a modern chapter, where researchers began calculating whether the secret could finally be extracted into the light. As archives were written, The coordinates were purged. But the silence didn't just last a century, it lasted for 800 years. And as the modern world turns its cold, clinical eyes toward the Mongolian wilderness, the hunt for a phantom has finally begun. By the contemporary era, the topographies anchoring the enigma had mutated into sectors of intense forensic scrutiny. Reconnaissance teams analyzed massifs, river systems, timberlines, and the boundless plains of Mongolia. Cartography achieved an analytical precision unmapped by preceding generations. Ancient codices underwent cross-examination against verified physical terrain. Coordinates once insulated by regional lore surfaced in academic discourse and tactical expedition blueprints. The physical cosmos remained static, yet the parameters of observation had fundamentally evolved. For the operatives executing these sweeps, the mission demanded an equilibrium of cold anticipation and information vacuum. The roar of combustion engines crossing remote sectors superseded the cavalry transit of antiquity. Cartographic data sheets unfolded alongside survival gear. Strategic briefings fluctuated between imperial archives and visible landmarks. Wind currents swept the identical gorges known to ancient vanguards, while researchers cross-referenced clues preserved in texts and oral intelligence. The hunt transformed into a direct collision between modern forensic science and an ancient void. Iterated expeditions systematically breached the perimeter. A new hypothesis would gain tactical traction, routing investigators toward a designated ridge or valley. Physical metrics underwent analysis. Observations were logged. Frequently, a coordinate appeared anomalous during initial scanning, only to yield zero data upon closer inspection. Scrutiny then migrated. Alternate vectors emerged. Distinct sectors commanded resources. This cycle rotated across decades, compounding a long trajectory of operations bound by a singular, unresolved equation. This operational baseline exposes the true nature of historical extraction. A mission does not achieve utility solely by securing its target. Many succeed by neutralizing false variables. Others dismantle inherited assumptions or unearth unmapped data points from antiquity. In the case of Genghis Khan's tomb, the absolute failure to extract a confirmed discovery became the narrative itself. Every abortive sweep deposited another layer of insulation over the enigma, proving how a hidden coordinate can dictate history precisely by remaining out of reach. As interest in the mystery intensified, investigators and scholars approached the sector from divergent vectors. Material analysts dissected ancient chronicles line by line to extract overlooked clues. Cartographers focused on geography, cross-referencing antiquities descriptions with the verified Mongolian wilderness. Distinct research factions isolated oral intelligence preserved within indigenous communes. Each methodology reflected a unique tactical framework. The hidden tomb mutated into a convergence zone where history, geography, archaeology, and collective memory collided. Early expeditions confronted severe operational friction. The Mongolian interior contains immense regions that defy comprehensive surveillance. Distances are vast. Atmospheric conditions shift violently. Sectors appearing accessible on cartographic layouts demanded grueling transit. Teams navigating these parameters balanced logistical reality against historical speculation. An anomalous coordinate could demand days of tactical movement, only to yield zero data, supporting the baseline hypothesis. Specific doctrines dictated the geography of the hunt. One faction concentrated resources on Burkhan Khaldun due to its imperial alignment with Genghis Khan. Counter-theories targeted alternate massifs, ravines, or isolated frontiers. Periodically, an unburied document or fresh translation redirected reconnaissance toward entirely unmapped sectors. The operation evolved through a continuous cycle of hypothesis, scanning, and tactical reassessment. This operational history is defined by the calculated evasion of certainty. A coordinate might present topographies consistent with ancient lore. An archaeological footprint might generate critical anomalies. A landscape could project the required parameters for an engineered burial. Yet, these metrics rarely yielded definitive proof. Material evidence consistently supported conflicting interpretations. Variables accumulated faster than conclusions, forcing researchers to navigate a matrix of probabilities rather than binary answers. Concurrently, the sweep generated high-value intelligence independent of the primary target. Expeditions mapped uncharted terrain. Archaeologists isolated previously unrecorded historical networks. Scholars extracted a deeper diagnostic understanding of Mongolian antiquity and culture. Even with the core objective unfulfilled, the reconnaissance advanced the broader historical field. The Enigma functioned as an engine for exploration, unearthing assets that transcended the burial coordinate. Across decades, a cyclical pattern solidified. An emergent theory triggered institutional momentum. Expeditions deployed, data underwent analysis. Then, the information vacuum returned. This loop rotated across disparate sectors and successive generations of analysts. Yet, rather than neutralizing obsession, these abortive sweeps intensified it. Each failure confirmed the scale of the challenge. The hidden sanctuary seemed to recede whenever reconnaissance closed in, ensuring history's most guarded enigma remained fortified despite relentless attempts to breach it. As the 20th century advanced, the search for Genghis Khan's tomb evolved into a highly structured, clinical operation. Individual vanguards were replaced by academic institutions, elite archaeological teams, and multidisciplinary analysts. Historical enigmas that once relied on speculative exploration now benefited from systematic documentation and empirical analysis. Cartography modernized, archival data digitized. Researchers cross-referenced evidence from disparate sectors and epochs. The hunt entered a professionalized phase, driven by expanding intelligence and rigorous methodology. This transition reshaped the operational framework. Early expeditions relied heavily on instinct, regional lore, or loose historical associations. Conversely, modern analysts demanded verifiable data sets. Archaeological sweeps surveyed terrain systematically. Historical codices underwent rigorous contextual analysis. Competing hypotheses were cross-examined rather than accepted at face value. The objective transcended merely identifying a suspect site. It required a coordinate capable of surviving intense forensic scrutiny. Yet, despite these logistical advancements, the enigma repelled resolution. Archival records contained permanent gaps. Oral intelligence offered strategic context, but lacked precise coordinates. The topographies under review presented a multitude of plausible variables. A lone ravine might validate one interpretation of the text. A massif could verify another. Analysts consistently confronted a matrix of multiple competing explanations. The barrier was not a deficit of hypotheses, but isolating which variable possessed the highest probability of accuracy. Global public interest further complicated the theater of operation. The phantom coordinate of history's most dominant conqueror captured the global subconscious. Print media, monographs, and broadcasts transmitted the enigma to massive audiences. Every fresh hypothesis triggered immediate momentum, and reports of potential anomalies generated intense anticipation. Yet, enthusiasm routinely outpaced empirical validation. Suspect locations required grueling secondary validation, and the vast majority ultimately yielded zero definitive data. This persistent deadlock underscores a fundamental reality of forensic historiography. Discovery is rarely linear. A singular clue never decodes a complex matrix. Data points must undergo microscopic evaluation and cross-examination against broader intelligence networks. Contradictions must be calculated. Alternate variables must be systematically dismantled. The search for Genghis Khan's interment continuously validated these parameters, advancing regional intelligence step by step, even as the terminal coordinate remained rationed. By the close of this era, the sweep had generated a massive repository of hypotheses, topographic data, and structural observations. Entire sectors had undergone microscopic analysis, and historical traditions had been dissected through divergent analytical frameworks. Yet, the core equation remained unresolved. The hidden sanctuary maintained its unique isolation within modern research, prominent enough to compel continuous intelligence operations, yet sufficiently fortified to evade confirmation. Each abortive deployment appended another chapter to the dossier, reinforcing the supreme durability of an enigma that had already resisted centuries of reconnaissance. One of the defining features of this pursuit is the sheer divergence of theories mutating over time. Analysts confronting the identical enigma consistently arrived at conflicting conclusions. One faction calculated that the sanctuary lay embedded within a sacred massif. Others targeted isolated ravines far from the established parameters of reconnaissance. A minority suggested a coordinate that had received near-zero attention. Each hypothesis reflected a distinct interpretation of the available metrics and a disparate framework of Mongolian antiquity. The operational sequence routinely initiated with a single anomaly, a cryptic entry in an ancient codex, a regional lineage preserved through generations, a structural irregularity scanned within the topography. These data fragments triggered deployments because they projected a vector toward resolution. Investigative vanguards tracked these indicators into massifs, dense timber, and the low steppe, attempting to synthesize scattered variables into a coherent mosaic. Frequently, the indicators appeared highly promising. Conversely, they led only to tactical dead ends. This history remains potent precisely because the landscape weaponized multiple variables simultaneously. The Mongolian interior encompasses immense sectors where an engineered interment could permanently elude detection. Isolated ravines punctuate numerous zones. Timbered slopes ration visibility. Alpine terrain deploys natural barriers against external scanning. An operative evaluating one coordinate might identify compelling metrics for concentration, while a competing faction could verify equally persuasive arguments elsewhere. The geometry itself enforced competing interpretations. As hypotheses multiplied, comparative analysis became critical. Scholars forensically measured how precisely each blueprint integrated with surviving archives. Archaeological data underwent review when available, and geographic constraints were calculated with clinical precision. Doctrines that appeared definitive in isolation lost strategic traction when weaponized against alternative models. This systematic cross-examination refined the sweep parameters, even when it failed to isolate the target. Eliminating weak variables achieved equal priority to identifying prime targets. The continuous mutation of fresh theories exposed the permanent geopolitical weight of the enigma. Research factions consistently mobilized capital, technology, and human assets because the probability of extraction remained high. The hidden sanctuary was never categorized as an unverifiable myth. It was treated as an operational equation awaiting absolute resolution. This calculation triggered successive approaches whenever previous deployments failed to breach the information vacuum. Yet, with each passing decade, an inverse pattern manifested. The enigma expanded alongside the reconnaissance itself. Fresh data generated alternative interpretations. Fresh interpretations carved out entirely new sectors of interest. Rather than contracting rapidly toward a single coordinate, the investigation continuously opened peripheral avenues for exploration. The outcome was an expanding matrix of variables. Advanced reconnaissance decoded Mongolia, its chronology, and its geometry, while the exact coordinate of the tomb remained insulated within that shifting field of knowledge. By the close of this period, the search for Genghis Khan's tomb had mutated into an independent historical narrative. What initiated as an enigma inherited from distant centuries evolved into a protracted sequence of expeditions, forensic investigations, and competing hypotheses. Reconnaissance teams deployed armed with cartography, imperial archives, and calculated blueprints. They breached massifs, scanned river systems, and cross-examined topographies linked to Mongolian antiquity. Many returned with high-value data, none extracted an outcome validated as the terminal answer. This permanent deadlock initially presents a striking paradox. Contemporary analysts command technological resources unconceptualized by ancestral lineages. They cross-reference transnational codices and evaluate landscapes with an analytical precision denied to ancient travelers. Archaeological methodology has achieved immense forensic sophistication. Yet, the hidden sanctuary repelled definitive verification. The tactical countermeasures that originally insulated the interment, synthesized with the compounding centuries, maintained an ironclad barrier to penetration. An unspoken rhythm dictates the chronology of these sweeps. Objective curiosity triggers a fresh hypothesis. The blueprint compels deployment. Evidence undergoes collection and analysis. For a designated window, resources concentrate on a single coordinate. Then, the information vacuum reemerges. Scrutiny migrates. This loop iterated with sufficient frequency to integrate into the macro narrative. The enigma transcended the phantom tomb itself, defined equally by the continuous mobilization of human assets attempting to intercept it. Concurrently, these abortive operations were not failures in a broader strategic sense. They expanded the geopolitical matrix of Mongolia's geography and unmapped historical coordinates. They forced tactical collaboration between historians, archaeologists, and indigenous communes, resurrecting ancestral lineages that might otherwise have faced archival extinction. The hunt enriched historical comprehension even while failing to breach the tomb itself. Every deployment contributed another data point to the overarching mosaic. The durability of this vacuum exposes the hard thresholds of historiography. Defiant pursuit does not guarantee immediate resolution. Certain equations remain open because the baseline data is incomplete. Others endure because the primary concealment was executed with absolute efficacy. The interment of Genghis Khan synthesizes both variables. The hidden grave occupies the exact convergence of calculated counterintelligence and historical distance, rendering it uniquely impervious to confident analysis. At this operational boundary, the dossier remains open. Infinite miles have been traversed. Numerous hypotheses have been weaponized. Reconnaissance teams have dissected massifs, timberlines, river networks, and isolated ravines across the Mongolian interior. Yet, the tomb maintains the identical unverified status it held before the initial modern deployment. The enigma survives not through a deficit of human surveillance, but because the landscape and the centuries have operated as formidable allies in guarding the coordinate. We no longer hunt with cavalry or intuition. We hunt with infrared sensors and satellite arrays capable of seeing through the very skin of the earth. But looking isn't the same as finding. And in the Mongolian interior, the landscape has learned how to hide in plain sight. In the contemporary pursuit of the hidden sanctuary, the landscape is no longer surveyed solely from ground level. Satellite arrays orbit high above the Mongolian interior, capturing high-resolution telemetry of massifs, timberlines, river networks, and the open steppe. Digital cartography displays structural metrics that ancestral vanguards could not conceptualize. Analysts scrutinize topographic patterns, scanning for anomalies that command closer inspection. The physical theater remains immense, yet it is now processed through optical lenses, electronic sensors, and imaging arrays operating from orbit. The execution of this modern methodology diverges sharply from conventional exploration. The echo of cavalry transit across the plains is replaced by operatives stationed before monitors saturated with geographic data. Geometrical lines, shapes, and structural shadows surface within satellite feeds. Algorithmic models expose elevations and concealed contours. Clinical analysis supersedes grueling transit through remote sectors. Yet, despite this technological layer, a profound detachment persists. The targeted topographies remain raw physical matrices, holding the sound of wind, water, and wilderness far beyond the perimeter of the screen. As technology advanced, forensic methodologies mutated. Advanced imaging arrays deployed greater definition. Archaeological sweeps achieved microscopic precision. Aerial reconnaissance exposed anomalies invisible from ground level. Researchers cross-examined expansive regions with unprecedented efficiency. Sectors once deemed inaccessible uniformized under orbital surveillance. Each systemic upgrade expanded the scope of the search, carving out fresh vectors to interrogate landscapes that had previously resisted structural analysis. This transformation reframes the friction between intelligence and enigma. Technology promises universal visibility, exposing sectors once shielded from human sight. Yet, visibility alone does not yield data validation. Satellite telemetry can map a ravine, but cannot decipher the history interred beneath its bedrock. The hunt for Genghis Khan's tomb validates this distinction. Powerful sensors sweep the terrain with clinical precision, yet the anomaly reminds researchers that certain secrets depend not on what can be detected, but on how ancient counterintelligence chose to execute erasure. One of the defining shifts in contemporary reconnaissance is the capacity to survey immense sectors without physical transit. Orbital telemetry permits analysts to scrutinize massifs, ravines, timberlines, and the steppe from above. Anomalies that would command weeks of ground maneuvers are evaluated within minutes on a monitor. This macro perspective isolates structural patterns unidentifiable from ground level. River networks expose their trajectories across entire basins. Mountain systems display structural relationships visible only when synthesized as a singular grid. Aerial surveillance integrated another layer into the operation. Aircraft equipped with optical payloads and specialized sensors harvest intelligence across remote frontiers. From altitude, subtle mutations in vegetation density, elevation, and surface geometry become detectable. Topographies appearing ordinary from the ground manifest anomalous shapes when scanned from the air. Researchers have deployed these vector sweeps to unearth ancient networks globally, triggering calculations that identical frameworks could breach the sanctuary of Genghis Khan. Processing this imagery commands an alternate form of observation. Instead of navigating valleys and forests directly, analysts dissect digital manifestations of the terrain. They scan for microanomalies, a slight elevation in the loam, an unexpected geometric contour, or variations in vegetation growth. The vast majority of these signatures yield zero data. Natural dynamics engineer infinite features that mimic artificial structures. Segregating actionable intelligence from baseline geology remains the core friction of the mission. Scale remains a formidable barrier. The Mongolian interior encompasses immense geography, and the sectors anchoring the enigma contain rugged, hostile terrain. Even with advanced systems, analysts must ration their focus. Every data sheet analyzed represents a fraction of the broader grid. Every suspect coordinate competes with infinite alternatives. Technology amplifies the volume of available intelligence, but it simultaneously exposes the sheer magnitude of the unmapped landscape. Time introduces another tactical complication. If the interment was intentionally scrubbed and subsequently mutated by centuries of ecological succession, physical signatures may be near invisible. Vegetation chokes structural lines. Erosion reshapes the topsoil. Natural processes systematically blur the boundary between human counterintelligence and raw nature. Analysts repeatedly find themselves hunting for physical indicators that have had centuries to dissolve. These metrics explain why orbital telemetry and aerial sweeps have failed to extract a terminal coordinate. The instruments are formidable, yet the enigma was engineered by equally potent forces. Distance, concealment, geometry, and time continue to restrict observation. Modern technology has expanded the scope of the sweep, but each new layout reinforces a grounding reality. The Mongolian wilderness remains vast enough, and the secret old enough, to defy electronic penetration. Alongside satellite arrays and aerial reconnaissance, archaeology has emerged as a premier intelligence vector in the contemporary search. Archaeologists interrogate the enigma through a framework distinct from the speculative expeditions of ancestral vanguards. Their operations isolate data points embedded within the geological matrix. Stratigraphy, material artifacts, mortuary architecture, and microtopographic anomalies form the baseline intelligence. Rather than hunting a single definitive discovery, analysts synthesize an understanding from fractured indicators harvested over extended timelines. The methodology remains clinical, rigorous, and completely detached from popular expectations. Modern non-invasive archaeology permits subsurface scanning without physical disruption. Sensors detect structural anomalies beneath the topsoil, isolating targets that command intensified scrutiny. Cartographic instruments plot coordinates with extreme precision. These methodologies possess critical utility within the Mongolian interior, where geopolitical protocols and indigenous ethical mandates dictate strict caution regarding ancestral interments. Operational commands prioritize non-destructive data extraction, mapping the subterranean terrain while preserving its natural configuration. The primary friction occurs during data verification. A subsurface anomaly captured by electronic sensors does not automatically yield its identity. Natural geological formations routinely mimic engineered infrastructure. Ancestral installations from disparate eras present identical profiles during preliminary scanning. Every metric undergoes forensic evaluation against broader historical and geographical matrices. Researchers cross-reference findings with established archaeological taxonomies, archival logs, and environmental telemetry, reconstructing a mosaic where core components remain missing. Tactical fieldwork remains non-negotiable. Even within an era of automated surveillance, vanguards must execute physical deployments into remote sectors. Operatives traverse isolated ravines, analyze exposed strata, and document structural anomalies firsthand. Direct physical reconnaissance exposes metrics that evade orbital payloads. Scale shifts, terrain complexity intensifies. The strategic relationship between ridges, water systems, and lowlands achieves absolute clarity. Orbital technology and ground operations function as a synchronized matrix rather than independent variables. Archaeology yields dividends that transcend the immediate interception of the tomb. Investigations continuously unearth ancestral outposts, logistical trade corridors, ritual hubs, and the material realities of nomadic antiquity. These assets reconstruct the exact geopolitical landscape dominated by Genghis Khan. Even when deployments fail to breach the primary sanctuary, they decode the broader historical theater. The hunt functions as a generator of historical intelligence, producing data that outgrows its original parameters. Yet, despite these sophisticated sweeps, empirical certainty remains rationed. Archaeology excels at exposing anomalies, but data rarely provides binary solutions. Each fresh discovery complicates the existing equation. A promising target demands years of forensic analysis. An intriguing subsurface anomaly ultimately proves to be baseline geology. The process advances through incremental progression, dictated by patience and clinical calculation. In this aspect, archaeology mirrors the architecture of the hidden tomb itself. Progress is objective, yet the terminal answer remains fortified beyond the horizon of modern intelligence. As technology achieved higher sophistication, researchers integrated divergent methodologies rather than relying on a singular vector. Satellite telemetry, aerial surveys, archaeological mapping, historical analysis, and geographic modeling converged to contract the search grid. Intelligence harvested from orbit was cross-examined against ground-level metrics. A coordinate isolated via remote sensing underwent immediate field surveillance. Historical traditions were measured against environmental datasets. The operation evolved into a synchronized matrix of multidisciplinary intelligence. This interdisciplinary strategy acknowledges the supreme complexity of the enigma. No lone document exposes the final coordinate. No verified monument routes reconnaissance to the target. The available data points remain scattered across vast topographies, oral traditions, and imperial archives. Researchers must therefore engineer connections between disparate variables. A massif cited in an ancient chronicle gains strategic weight when its geometry matches the requirements for tactical concealment. An isolated ravine intensifies in value when archaeological sweeps detect ancestral human activity. Patterns materialize through comparative analysis rather than isolated discoveries. Computational processing has fundamentally transformed data organization and diagnostics. Massive repositories of geographic datasets undergo simultaneous analysis. Analysts construct digital terrain models to map the exact relationship between river systems, elevations, and ancestral logistics corridors. These algorithms isolate sectors matching the precise conditions recorded in historical lore. Instead of evaluating each variable independently, scholars cross-examine entire regions through systematic analysis, translating the landscape into an information network rather than a mere collection of coordinates. Yet, every technological upgrade introduces fresh friction. Expanded data streams amplify variables. A single satellite layout can expose numerous anomalies commanding field deployment. Geographic models frequently highlight multiple regions displaying equal probability. Archival records validate conflicting interpretations depending on the analytical framework applied. The dossier grows richer in data, but not simpler in execution. Researchers gain deeper topographic clarity while continuing to face an information vacuum regarding which indicators dictate the truth. This equilibrium between technological dominance and historical defiance remains striking. Modern sensors detect features choked by dense vegetation, map remote sectors with surgical precision, and analyze topographies at scales unconceptualized by ancestral generations. Yet, these capabilities do not automatically dissolve uncertainty. The terminal site, if intact, occupies a landscape re-engineered by centuries of ecological succession and deliberate counterintelligence. Technology illuminates possibilities. It cannot compel the past to surrender its assets. This reality infuses the pursuit with a cold, analytical gravity. Operatives do not confront a deadlock through a deficit of effort or intelligence. They confront a deadlock because the defensive parameters of the target are genuinely absolute. Every fresh methodology expands regional comprehension while exposing deeper strata of complexity. The hunt advances through tactical patience, institutional cooperation, and forensic analysis, progressing step by step across a landscape that continues to guard one of history's most defiant unanswered equations. By the present day, the search for Genghis Khan's tomb has entered an era that earlier generations could scarcely have imagined. Satellites orbit far above the Earth. Digital maps display remote valleys in extraordinary detail. Archaeologists use instruments capable of detecting subtle variations beneath the surface. Computers organize vast amounts of information and reveal patterns hidden within complex data. The technological tools available to modern researchers are powerful, precise, and constantly improving. Yet the mystery continues to endure alongside them. One reason for this persistence lies in the nature of the landscape itself. Mongolia remains a country of immense scale. Mountain ranges stretch across large regions. Forests conceal valleys and ridges. Grasslands extend toward distant horizons. Even with advanced technology, researchers must decide where to focus their efforts. The available territory is enormous, and many areas possess characteristics consistent with historical theories. The challenge is not merely observing the landscape. It is determining which parts of that landscape matter most. Another factor is the extraordinary passage of time. Nearly 8 centuries separate the present from the burial of Genghis Khan. During that interval, weather, vegetation, erosion, and countless natural processes have altered the environment. Human activity has also reshaped certain regions. Evidence that may once have been visible could now be faint, fragmented, or entirely obscured. Technology helps researchers detect subtle clues, but it cannot fully reverse the effects of centuries of change. There is also the possibility that the original concealment was exceptionally successful. If the burial site was deliberately hidden and traces were intentionally removed, modern researchers face a challenge created not only by nature, but also by human planning. The mystery survives because multiple layers of protection may have worked together. Geography provided isolation. Time encouraged forgetting. Concealment limited knowledge. Technology must contend with all of these factors simultaneously. Despite these difficulties, the search continues to generate valuable discoveries. Researchers learn more about Mongolian history, landscapes, and archaeological sites with each investigation. New methods reveal information that would once have remained inaccessible. Even when the tomb itself is not found, the process deepens understanding of the world connected to Genghis Khan and the people who lived during his era. The search expands knowledge in many directions at once. As this chapter draws to a close, the contrast remains striking. Human technology has reached remarkable heights. Machines can observe the Earth from space and analyze details invisible to the naked eye. Yet somewhere within Mongolia, a mystery born in the 13th century, continues to resist confirmation. The landscape remains larger than any single investigation. The past remains more complex than any single theory. For now, the hidden tomb stays beyond reach, reminding us that even in an age of powerful technology, some questions continue to wait patiently for their answer. Even with the power of orbit and the precision of AI, the enigma refuses to break. We are no longer just searching for a grave. We are confronting a tactical masterpiece of erasure that was designed to outlive the human race. Somewhere within the Mongolian interior, the physical asset of this enigma remains interred beneath the bedrock. Massifs cast long shadows across ravines. Dense timber chokes the slopes with strata of vegetation. The steppe extends across immense frontiers under mutating skies, while river systems execute their ancient trajectories. The suspect resting place, regardless of its coordinates, stays integrated within this broader ecosystem, anchored in a cosmos dominated by raw geometry rather than monuments, insulated by natural barriers engineered to guard a coordinate for generations. To interrogate the mystery today is to balance clinical curiosity against deep detachment. Cartographic layouts undergo analysis. Satellite telemetry faces cross-examination. Imperial codices are parsed and correlated. Yet, beyond these data streams lies the raw topography itself. Wind sweeps through the highland grass. Rain fractures remote gorges. Snow blankets the ridges before dissolving with the seasonal cycle. The physical reality of Mongolia operates independently of human surveillance, maintaining its sovereign rhythm across the terrain. Across generations, the strategic objective of the pursuit underwent a systematic mutation. Ancestral vanguards calculated that the target waited just beyond the next physical horizon. Contemporary analysts approach the equation with calculated patience, subjecting fresh indicators to forensic scrutiny and weighing indigenous cultural traditions against material data. The mandate has outgrown the primitive drive for mere discovery. The enigma is now processed as an institutional chronicle of memory, preservation, and the velocity of time across a designated landscape. This evolution reframes the historical threshold. Certain hidden sanctuaries survive not through a deficit of reconnaissance, but because human agents executed a command to protect them. If the interment was designed to resist extraction, the permanent data void transcends a simple unsolved puzzle. It represents the flawless execution of counterintelligence transmitted across centuries. Consequently, the absence of empirical certainty achieves independent validity. The phantom sanctuary retains its gravity not because it might be intercepted, but because it demonstrates how effectively antiquity can seal a secret. As the search enters the present day, a compelling equation materializes. The mystery survives not through analytical failure, but because the primary strategy behind the burial achieved total execution. Throughout this chronicle, identical vectors emerge: secrecy, distance, topography, memory, time. Each element reinforced the preservation of the sanctuary, engineering a defensive matrix far more durable than walls, fortifications, or monuments. Consider the raw geography. The Mongolian interior encompasses immense frontiers where human presence shrinks. Mountain massifs fragment the terrain into isolated ravines. Dense timber chokes structural signatures from distant surveillance. The steppe extends across endless horizons. Even armed with modern mechanized transport and advanced sensors, reconnaissance faces a scale that defies rapid penetration. A concealed coordinate within this environment exploits natural protection that outlasts the architects who engineered it. Tradition enforced an identical mandate. Cultural values governing mortuary privacy and ancestral reverence dictated the protocols of the 13th century. If the architects calculated that concealment honored the sovereign, secrecy transcended tactical utility. It became part of the ritual architecture. The hidden coordinate operated as an extension of the interment, guarding the grave meant enforcing the decree. The resulting data void was never an accidental consequence, but a core specification woven into the original design. Time consolidated these defenses. Each successive generation drifted further from the flashpoint. Memories dissolved, topographies mutated, and logistical corridors vanished. Imperial records fractured. Incremental updates faded until historical certainty became unrecoverable. No single event purged the coordinate from archives. Rather, centuries executed the deletion. The process unfolded with such deliberate inertia that no individual generation witnessed the erasure. By the time modern researchers initiated systematic sweeps, they confronted the compounding architecture of hundreds of years. Ethical deference introduces another layer of preservation. The population views Genghis Khan not merely as an imperial strategist, but as a core cultural ancestor. Consequently, execution of field surveys or intrusive excavations involves strict ethical mandates alongside scientific diagnostics. Researchers must balance curiosity against sovereign sensitivity. The impulse for empirical data coexists with the realization that specific sanctuaries demand immunity regardless of their contents, restricting how deployments are executed and how potential anomalies are verified. When these variables converge, the survival of the enigma appears logical. Geography concealed, tradition protected, time obscured, and deference mandated caution. The tomb endured because multiple vectors aligned toward a singular outcome. Rather than decaying over centuries, these forces systematically reinforced one another, transmitting the secret from the 13th century into the contemporary world. There is another equation worth considering. The pursuit may eventually reach a threshold where the enigma itself transcends the final answer. This will not halt field operations. Fresh intelligence will undergo scrutiny. Emerging technologies will deploy. Imperial archives will face re-examination. Yet, across generations, the Chronicle has outgrown a simple question of coordinates. It has mutated into a study on how history survives, how topographies preserve secrets, and how certain questions endure across centuries. Most historical enigmas dissolve upon interception. A lost citadel is mapped, a forgotten codex is translated, an unverified site receives empirical confirmation. Uncertainty surrenders to documentation. The burial of Genghis Khan occupies a different status. After centuries of speculation, theories, and systematic sweeps, the data void has become a core element of its identity. The world is drawn to this chronicle not merely through the anticipation of discovery, but because the permanent absence of an answer sustains the gravity of the pursuit. This quality grants the mystery a unique relationship with time. Each generation encounters the identical equation and responds with its own methodologies. Medieval chroniclers preserved oral traditions. Early explorers pursued rumors and regional folklore. Contemporary analysts deploy satellite telemetry and subsurface radar. Future operatives will likely command instruments yet unengineered. The operational tactics mutate, yet the central enigma remains unchanged, forging a bridge between actors separated by centuries, all tracking the same unanswered signal. The physical terrain guarantees this enduring appeal. A hidden tomb beneath a crowded urban center would evoke one form of curiosity. A hidden sanctuary somewhere within the vast frontiers of Mongolia commands another. The massifs, timberlands, river systems, and steppes sustain uncertainty through sheer scale. When analysts scan those immense horizons, it becomes logical how a sovereign coordinate could survive for centuries without fracturing under external surveillance. A stark equilibrium persists between empirical knowledge and historical defiance. Historians command vast data regarding Genghis Khan's campaigns, his administrative matrix, and his geopolitical legacy. Simultaneously, one deeply personal detail remains entirely unresolved. This friction confirms that historical comprehension is rarely absolute. Even the architects of global empires leave questions behind, unanswered equations that integrate into their permanent legacy. Whether reconnaissance eventually penetrates the tomb or fails, the pursuit has already yielded its dividend. It has demonstrated how history, geography, memory, and strategic culture interact over long intervals of time. The enigma survives because it triggers all of these vectors simultaneously. A concealed interment mutated into a multi-century chronicle. A question regarding a single coordinate became a study on the relationship between the human past and the landscapes that quietly carry it forward. Another variable dictating this permanent concealment is the cold reality that historical equations do not guarantee a resolution. Contemporary culture reinforces the doctrine that sufficient data extraction will inevitably decode any enigma. In many theaters, this calculation holds true. Defunct strongholds have been mapped, dead lexicons deciphered, obscured chronologies reconstructed from fractured indices. Yet, history enforces rigid thresholds. Certain data perishes, specific logs are never archived, physical indicators dissolve beyond recovery. The interment of Genghis Khan exists at that exact perimeter where empirical certainty yields to the void. The weight of nearly 8 centuries compounds this structural barrier. Time operates as more than an archival metric. It actively mutates the parameters of data survival. Textual assets degrade, oral intelligence shifts, topographies evolve through autonomous ecological vectors. Anthropogenic activity reshapes designated sectors, neutralizing ancient patterns and markers. Operational commands analyzing the enigma today are isolated from the flashpoint by a chasm that transcends mere geography. They are separated by the compounding architecture of hundreds of years. This realization forces a recalibration of the strategic intent. Rather than interrogating solely whether the coordinate can be breached, analytics can evaluate what the pursuit exposes regarding the thresholds of historical intelligence. Every sweep illuminates the friction between evidence, interpretation, and systemic uncertainty. Analysts cross-examine sources, test blueprints, and dismantle competing models. Through this protocol, they extract data not merely regarding the burial anomaly, but regarding the core mechanics used to decode antiquity. The hunt mutates into an exploration of historiography itself. This operational baseline remains profoundly grounding. Human intelligence has mapped oceanic trenches, scanned deep space, and engineered orbital arrays to monitor the globe from space. Yet, a singular, unmapped coordinate within the Mongolian interior systematically repels definitive verification. The paradox is absolute. It demonstrates that the advancement of knowledge is nonlinear. Certain targets collapse rapidly under forensic surveillance. Others remain fortified because the surrounding parameters are genuinely absolute. The deadlock further validates the weaponization of absence. Historians traditionally synthesize surviving data points. Here, the challenge commands the processing of data that may have been intentionally purged, camouflaged, or redacted. Researchers must reconstruct a matrix defined precisely by what is missing, a highly specialized historical problem demanding extreme patience and clinical judgment. Conclusions must be strictly rationed, as binary certainty is rarely accessible. Consequently, the probability that the tomb will permanently elude extraction cannot be discarded. This outcome does not signify analytical failure. It is the logical baseline of an unprecedented historical equation. A concealed burial, fortified by topography, counterintelligence, time, and incomplete intelligence registers, may indefinitely deny penetration. If so, the enigma will endure not through a deficit of human surveillance, but because certain secrets remain impenetrable even after centuries of concentrated reconnaissance. As this journey through the enigma draws to its conclusion, the hidden tomb remains anchored exactly where it initiated. Somewhere verified, somewhere unmapped. A coordinate resting beneath a mountain slope, within an isolated ravine, beside an ancient watercourse, or in a topography that has evaded surveillance entirely. The variables remain active. The Earth rations its answer. The centuries compound above it. The anomaly survives because empirical certainty has failed to intercept the signal. Retrospective analysis of the macro-narrative exposes a highly distinct pattern. The Mongolian steppe established the theater. The final days of Genghis Khan dictated a clandestine interment. Traditions enforced counterintelligence. Topographies absorbed physical traces. Generations transmitted fragmented intelligence forward while losing the terminal coordinates. Explorers deployed, scholars debated, orbital sensors swept the terrain. Every chapter advanced structural understanding, yet none extracted a verified location. The enigma persisted through every mutation in methodology, every fresh hypothesis, and every passing century. This supreme durability carries independent strategic weight. Not every critical matrix of history is preserved via monuments or archival logs. Specific assets survive through absolute absence. The hidden sanctuary has dictated the vectors of historians, archaeologists, specialists, and chroniclers precisely by remaining unbreached. Its data void has compelled the systemic exploration of Mongolia's topographies, traditions, and chronology. In tracking a singular answer, reconnaissance teams unhatched a multitude of peripheral histories. The operation yielded immense value regardless of whether the final target was neutralized. A clinical gravity exists in accepting this analytical vacuum. Human intellect naturally demands terminal data. We require the coordinate. We demand the map contain one final, definitive marker. Yet, history occasionally enforces an alternate framework. Periodically, the past deploys a calculation and leaves it permanently unresolved. The open-ended nature of this mystery commands absolute patience, proving that regional intelligence can expand even while certainty remains rationed. Systematic knowledge and deliberate mystery are not opposing forces. They operate as a synchronized matrix. Far into the future, analytical vanguards may continue parsing the evidence. Fresh anomalies may surface. Instruments not yet engineered may expose datasets hidden today. Alternately, the sanctuary may remain insulated beneath the precise topographies that have shielded it for centuries. Both vectors remain valid. Neither can be dismissed with tactical confidence. The future, mirroring the past, maintains an absolute capacity for uncertainty. For now, the massifs, timberlines, river networks, and open plains of Mongolia sustain their long dialogue with time. Seasonal cycles cross the frontier. Atmospheric conditions reshape the topsoil. Generations cycle through the theater. Somewhere within that immense grid, a sovereign secret remains interred beneath the bedrock. Whether it is ever extracted or not, the enigma has already achieved an unprecedented objective. It has outlasted empires, centuries, and orbital surveillance, carrying a hidden chapter of global history silently forward into the future. Somewhere within the shifting shadows of the Mongolian interior, the bedrock keeps its secret. Whether it remains locked in the deep earth or is destined to be unearthed by future eyes, the truth of the hidden grave has already achieved its goal. It did not need a monument to reach immortality. It needed only the vacuum of a mystery that time itself could not fill. The map ends here, but the history remains, buried beneath the silence.